God, we've never done this. I don't know exactly where to stand. So it's my honor to welcome everyone, both here in person and who's watching online, to our first ever Facebook Live Town Hall with President Barack Obama. So we've been fortunate to be able to work with this administration on many issues we care about: education, jobs, technology, and most recently, the White House Conference on Bullying Prevention. Well, today we have the president for the first time visiting us, but since he's one of the most popular people on Facebook with 19 million likes, we feel like he's coming home, so welcome home, Mr. President. We're honored to have many special guests joining us today, along with all of you. House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi. There you are. Our own Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. California State Controller John Chang. United States Representatives Anna Eshoo, John Garamendi, and Mike Honda. Our own mayor in Palo Alto, Sydney Espinoza. President of the Board of Supervisors of Santa Clara County, David Cortez. And Assembly Member Nora Campos. Thank you all for being here. So today we're going to talk about the fiscal challenges facing our country and the difficult decisions we all need to make together. President Obama is going to take questions both from the live audience and for people online. So if you're watching online, please submit your questions, and even though it's Facebook, no poking the president. With that, I get to call up Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook's founder and our CEO. Mark is going to moderate the discussion, and he'll be reading the questions you submit online. Thank you all for coming, and come on up, Mark.
So a lot of people all over the world use Facebook to share a lot of things. Things about their day, things about their family, their kids, and of course their views on things like politics. And more, a lot of government officials and candidates and folks are also using Facebook to share their views with the people who are following them. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. We have the President of the United States here. So it's never been as easy in the history of the world for people to have their voice heard and exercise their freedom of speech. Just post something, comment, like. But it's good to complement that online dialogue with some FaceTime as well. And what better way to do that than by having a Facebook Live Q&A with the President. So it is our honor to welcome to Facebook the President of the United States, Barack Obama.
Well, thank you so much, Facebook, for hosting this, first of all. My name is Barack Obama, and I'm the guy who got Mark to wear a jacket and tie. Thank you. I'm very proud of that.
Second time.
I know. I will say, and I hate to tell stories on Mark, but the first time we had dinner together and he wore this jacket and tie, I'd say halfway through dinner, he's starting to sweat a little bit. It's really uncomfortable for him. So I helped him out of his jacket. And in fact, if you'd like, Mark, we can take our jackets off. Okay.
No, that's good.
Whew, that's better, isn't it?
Yeah, but you're a lot better at this stuff than me.
So, first of all, I just want to say thank you to all of you for taking the time, not only people who are here in the audience, but also folks all over the country and some around the world who are watching this town hall. The main reason we wanted to do this is, first of all, because more and more people, especially young people, are getting their information through different media. And obviously what all of you have built together is helping to revolutionize how people get information, how they process information, how they're connecting with each other. And historically, part of what makes for a healthy democracy, what is a good politics, is when you've got citizens who are informed, who are engaged. And what Facebook allows us to do is make sure this isn't just a one-way conversation. Make sure that not only am I speaking to you, but you're also speaking back, and we're in a conversation, we're in a dialogue. So I love doing town hall meetings. This format and this company, I think, is an ideal means for us to be able to carry on this conversation. And as Mark mentioned, obviously we're having a very serious debate right now about the future direction of our country. We are living through as tumultuous a time as certainly I've seen in my lifetime. Admittedly, my lifetime's a lot longer than most of yours so far. This is a pretty young crowd. But we're seeing domestically a whole series of challenges, starting with the worst recession we've had since the Great Depression. We're just now coming out of it. We've got all sorts of disruptions, technological disruptions that are taking place, most of which hold the promise of making our lives a lot better, but also mean that there are a lot of adjustments that people are having to make throughout the economy. We still have a very high unemployment rate that is starting to come down, but there are an awful lot of people who are being challenged out there day in, day out, worrying about whether they can pay the bills, whether they can keep their home. Internationally, we're seeing the sorts of changes that we haven't seen in a generation. We've got certain challenges like energy and climate change that no one nation can solve, but we're going to have to solve together. And we don't yet have all the institutions that are in place in order to do that. But what makes me incredibly optimistic, and that's why being here at Facebook is so exciting for me, is that at every juncture in our history, whenever we've faced like this, whether it's been the shift from an agricultural age to an industrial age, or whether it was facing the challenges of the Cold War, or trying to figure out how we make this country more fair and more inclusive. At every juncture, we've always been able to adapt. We've been able to change, and we've been able to get ahead of the curve. And that's true to having around debt and our deficits is so important, because it's going to help determine whether we can invest in our future and basic research and innovation and infrastructure that allow us to compete in the 21st century and still preserve a safety net for the most vulnerable among us. But I'm also going to want to share ideas with you about how we can make our democracy work better and our politics work better, because I don't think there's a problem out there that we can't solve. if we decide that we're going to solve it together. For that, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you. And instead of just giving a lot of long speeches, I want to make sure that we've got time for as many questions as possible. So, Mark, I understand you've got the first one.
Yeah, so let's start off. So let's start off with the conversation about the debt, right? So I understand that yesterday morning you had a town hall in Virginia where you talked about your framework, not only for resolving the short-term budget issues, but the longer-term debt.
Right.
And you spent some time talking about tax reform and some cost cutting, but you also spent a lot of time talking about things that you didn't think that we could cut in education, infrastructure, and clean energy. So my question to kind of start off is, what specifically do you think we should do, and what specifically do you think we can cut in order to make this all add up?
Good. Well, let me first of all, Mark, share with you sort of the nature of the problem, because I think a lot of folks understand that it's a problem, but aren't sure how it came about. In 2000, at the end of the Clinton administration, we not only had a balanced budget, but we actually had a surplus. And that was in part because of some tough decisions that had been made by President Clinton, Republican Congresses, Democratic Congresses, and President George H.W. Bush. And what they had said was, let's make sure that we're spending wisely on the things that matter, let's spend less on things that don't matter, and let's make sure that we're living within our means, that we're taking in enough revenue to pay for some of these basic obligations. What happened then was we went through 10 years where we forgot what had created the surplus in the first place. So we had a massive tax cut that wasn't offset by cuts in spending. We had two wars that weren't paid for, and this was the first time in history where we had gone to war and not asked for additional sacrifice from American citizens. We had a huge prescription drug plan that wasn't paid for. And so by the time I started office, we already had about $1 trillion annual deficit, and we had massive accumulated debt with interest payments to boot. Then you have this huge recession. And so what happens is less revenues coming in because company sales are lower, individuals are making less money. At the same time, there's more need out there. So we're having to help states and we're having to help local governments. And that a lot of what the recovery was about was us making sure that the economy didn't tilt over into a depression by making sure that teachers weren't laid off and firefighters weren't laid off and there was still construction for roads and so forth. All of which was expensive. I mean, that added about another $1 trillion worth of debt. So now what we've got is a situation, not only do we have this accumulated debt, but the baby boomers are just now starting to retire. And what's scary is not only that the baby boomers are retiring at a greater rate, which means they're making greater demands on Social Security, but primarily Medicare and Medicaid, but health care costs go up a lot faster than inflation, and older populations use more health care costs. You put that all together, and we have an unsustainable situation. So right now, we face a critical time where we're going to have to make some decisions. How do we bring down the debt in the short term, and how do we bring down the debt over the long term? In the short term, Democrats and Republicans now agree we've got to reduce the debt by about $4 trillion over the next 10 years. And I know that sounds like a lot of money. It is, but it's doable if we do it in a balanced way. What I proposed was that about $2 trillion over 10 to 12 years is a reduction in spending. You know, government wastes, just like every other major institution does. And so there are things that we do that we can afford not to do. Now, there's some things that I'd like to do, are fun to do, but we just can't afford them right now. So we've made cuts in every area. A good example is Pentagon spending, where Congress oftentimes stuffs weapons systems in the Pentagon budget that the Pentagon itself says we don't need. But special interests and constituencies help to bloat the Pentagon budget. So we've already reduced the Pentagon budget by about $400 billion, we think we can do about another $400 billion. So we've got to look at spending, both on non-security issues as well as defense spending. And then what we've said is, let's take another $1 trillion of that we raise through reforms in the tax system that allows people like me, and frankly, you, Mark, for paying a little more in taxes. I know you're okay with that. Keep in mind, what we're talking about is going back to the rates that existed when Bill Clinton was president. Now, a lot of you were I'm trying to say this delicately, still in diapers at that time, but for those of you who recall, the economy was booming, and wealthy people were getting wealthier. There wasn't a problem at that time. If we go back to those rates alone, that by itself would do a lot in terms of us reducing our overall spending. And if we can get $1 trillion on the revenue side, $2 trillion in cutting spending, we can still make investments in basic research. We can still invest in something we call ARPA-E, which is like DARPA, except just focused on energy, so that we can figure out what are the next breakthrough technologies that can help us reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. We can still make investments in education. So we've already expanded the Pell Grant program so that more young people can go to college. We're investing more in STEM education, math and science and technology education. We can still make those investments. We can still rebuild our roads and our bridges and invest in high-speed rail and invest in the next generation of broadband and wireless and make sure everybody has access to the internet. We can do all those things while still bringing down the deficit medium term. Now, there's one last component of this, and I know this is a long answer, but I want to make sure everybody had the basic foundations for it. Even if we get this $4 trillion, we do still have a long-term problem with Medicare and Medicaid, because healthcare costs, the inflation goes up so much faster than wages and salaries. And this is where there's another big philosophical debate with the Republicans, because what I've said is the best way for us to change it is to build on the health reform that we had last year and start getting a better bang for our healthcare dollar. We waste so much on healthcare. We spend about 20% more than any other country on earth, and we have worse outcomes because we end up having multiple tests when we could just do one test and have it shared among physicians on Facebook, for example. We could focus on the chronically ill. 20% of the patients account for 80% of the costs. So doing something simple like reimbursing hospitals and doctors for reducing their readmissions rate and managing somebody with a chronic illness like diabetes so that they're taking their meds on a regular basis so that they don't come to the emergency room, that saves huge amounts of money. So that's what health care reform was about last year or a year and a half ago. And what we want to do is build on that and continue to improve the system. What the Republicans right now are saying is, number one, they can't agree to any increases in taxes, which means we'd have to cut out of that $4 trillion. All of it would come from education, transportation, areas that I think are critical for our long-term future. So, for example, they propose 70% cuts in clean energy. Well, I don't know how we free ourselves in dependence on foreign oil, and anybody who's paying gas prices knows that there's an economic component to this as well as an environmental component to it, if we're not investing in the basic research and technology that allows solar, wind, and others to thrive and develop. At the same time, what they've said is, let's make Medicare into a voucher program so that retirees, instead of knowing that they're always going to have health care, they're going to get a voucher that covers part of the cost, and whatever health care inflation comes up is all going to be on them. And if the health insurance companies don't sell you policy that covers your illnesses, you're out of luck. I think it is very important for us to have a basic social safety net for families with kids with disabilities, for seniors, for folks who are in nursing homes, and I think it's important for us to invest in our basic research. We can do all those things, but we're only going to be able to do it by taking a balanced approach, and that's what this big debate is about all about right now. All right?
All right, so, sorry, don't mean to cut off the applause.
No.
No. It's a very thorough answer.
No. They were stunned by the length of that answer. But, it's complicated stuff.
So the next question is,